Welcome to episode 186 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. It is May 5, 1918. Paris. A small ground in the 15th arrondissement, on the Rue Olivier Dessert. There are wooden huts being used as dressing rooms, no showers, a bumpy pitch, a little stand, around 2,000 people watching, and France is still at war. The Western Front has not gone quiet. The armistice is still 6 months away. Men are still in the trenches, and clubs are missing players. Some regions cannot probably take part at all, and yet, here in Paris, 2 football teams are playing for a new national trophy. Olympique de Pantin against Football Club de Lyon. It is the first final of what we now call Coupe de France. Back then, it is Coupe Charles-Simon. And it is born in one of the most unlikely settings imaginable. Not after the war, when France can breathe again, but during it. A national cup, inspired by England's FA Cup, created by Henri Delaunay, supported by Jules Rimet, named after a football organizer killed at the front, and won by a club from Pantin that gives the new competition its first great upset story almost immediately. Olympique de Pantin win 3-0. Émile Fievé scores twice. Louis Daquès adds the third. And French football, still divided, still grieving, still improvising, has created a tournament that would outlive the war, the pandemic, the federations that made it, and almost every club that played in its first edition. But how did we get here? We start with a simple point. Football in France did not grow as one tidy national system. It arrived through British influence, ports, schools, expatriate clubs, Parisian enthusiasts, and young Frenchmen fascinated by the English game. In the 1890s, organized football is still mostly a Paris story. Standard Athletic Club, White Rovers, Club Français. These are the kinds of names that tell you how strong the British imprint still is. In 1894, the US FSA, the Union des Sociétés Françaises des Sports Athlétiques, recognizes football and organizes what is usually treated as the first French football championship. Standard Athletic Club beat White Rovers after a replay. That matters because it shows how early the sport is trying to find structure. But it is not yet one national football pyramid. It's more like islands of organization. Then comes the 1900 Paris Olympics. Now we have to be careful here. This is not an Olympic football tournament in the modern sense. Far from it. It is closer to an exhibition inside a wider fair-like Olympic program. There are only a couple of matches. Upton Park, an English amateur club, which was immortalized for hosting the very first goal in the FA Cup in 1871, as we talked about way back in episode 11, beat Club Français 4-0. A French side also plays a Belgian university selection. It's a glimpse of international football before international football knows what it wants to be, and years before FIFA was even a thing. The deeper problem is that France has football, but not football unity. There is the US FSA. There are Catholic sports organizations, especially the FGSPF. There are cycling and athletic federations that also take football under their umbrella. If you listen to episode 163 about Belgium's first champions, you'll notice a lot of similarity here. There are arguments around amateurism, religion, social class, regional authority, and who gets to speak for the game. And this is where Charles-Simon enters. Simon is one of the great organizing figures of early French sport, Catholic, energetic, administratively gifted, and central to the creation of the Comité Français Interfédéral, the CFI, in 1907. The name tells you the problem. Interfederal. It is an attempt to bring the pieces together without pretending the pieces don't exist. By the eve of the First World War, French football is still divided among federations, but there's now at least a mechanism for cooperation. And then comes Henri Delaunay. Delaunay is one of those men who belongs in several football origin stories at once. He will later be central to the idea of a European national team championship, the tournament that becomes the Euros. The trophy today is named after him, but long before that, he is a French football administrator, referee, organizer, and obsessive. And in April 1902, he crosses the channel. He goes to London for the FA Cup final. The match is Sheffield United against Southampton at Crystal Palace. It finishes 1-1 in front of a huge crowd, roughly 75,000 people. Sheffield United win the replay a week later. But for Delaunay, the important thing is not only the result, it is the event, the scale, the ritual, the way a cup final can pull a sport together. Delaunay is still a teenager, but he leaves with a promise to himself. One day, French football should have an event of that size. That is the seed. But it takes 15 years, a war, and a dead colleague for the seed to become a competition. The First World War changes everything. France's national championship effectively disappears in normal form. Players are mobilized. Travel is disrupted. Northern and Eastern clubs are in regions too affected by the war to participate as they would in peacetime. Football continues, but it does so in wartime fragments. And in 1915, Charles-Simon is killed at the front. That death gives the future cup its name and its emotional charge, because the first version of the Coupe de France is not called the Coupe de France. It is the Coupe Charles-Simon, a memorial competition, a football tribute, and also a political act of sporting unity. The competition is officially created on January 15 in 1917 by the CFI, under Delaunay's impulse. The project is also supported by a major French organizer named Jules Rimet, the founder of Red Star, a lawyer, and a man with a clear belief that football can be social glue. Soon after the war, he will become the first president of the newly formed French Federation, and later, he will drive the creation of the World Cup. So look at the cast around this cup. Delaunay, future father of the European Championship. Rimet, future father of the World Cup. Simon, early federal pioneer, killed in the war. And in the middle of them, a trophy. The trophy is real, not symbolic. It's a proper cup made by the Parisian jeweler Chaubilon. And the financing is part of the story. The magazine Lecture pour tout supports the competition, provides money for travel and medals, and helps turn the idea into something that clubs can actually enter. In other words, even during the war, the organizers understand that ritual matters. The cup has to look like a cup. The final has to feel like a final. The competition has to be more than a fixture list. That is the extraordinary contradiction. Men are dying at the front, and French football is arranging a national knockout tournament. But the contradiction is also the point. The cup is not pretending the war is not happening. It is happening because the war is happening, because France needs symbol of unity, because young men and clubs still need civic life, and because sport can create continuity when everything else feels broken. The first tournament begins in October 1917. 48 clubs enter, representing the different federations gathered under the CFI umbrella. Many come from Paris and its suburbs. The north and east of France are underrepresented because the war makes normal participation impossible. The format is straight knockout, one match, extra time, replays if necessary. Geography helps shape the early rounds. It is practical, improvised, and deeply ambitious all at once. The finalists are Olympique de Pantin and FC Lyon. Olympique de Pantin had been founded in 1895 in the Paris suburbs. By 1918, they're not nobody, but they're not the establishment favorite either. Their run gives the competition exactly what every cup competition needs, the sense that the bracket can misbehave. They beat Lyon Saint-Michel 4-1, then Lyon Olympique Universitaire 5-1, then Club Français 3-2 after extra time. In the semi-final, they beat Club Athlétique de la Société Générale 2-1, the great Parisian corporate side and one of the favorites. That is the first real cup set mythology. FC Lyon's road is also remarkable. They beat AS Lyonnais, then Olympique de Marseille, then Stade Rennais, then AS Française. The semi-final against AS Française is played in Lyon as a charity event, and Henri Delaunay himself referees. FC Lyon win 1-0, another surprise. So the first final is not simply two teams arriving. It is two teams proving immediately this new competition will not behave like a closed hierarchy. Then comes May 5, 1918. The venue is the Stade de la Légion Saint-Michel, not a grand national stadium, but a modest Paris ground. Wooden barracks without showers, a small stand, and a playing surface uneven enough to remind you that the Coupe de France did not begin in glamour. It begins with improvisation. The match itself is fast, physical, and strange. Olympique wear blue, FC Lyon wear red and white. There's an early flashpoint when Olympique's Decoux is sent off for striking André Weber. Then in a wonderful odd football moment, Lyon captain Roger Ebrard asks for him to be allowed back on. He is reinstated. Fair play, paternalism, and chaos, all in one incident. And then Olympique takes control. Émile Fivet scores the first, and then the second. And Louis Daquès misses the penalty, but later scores the third. Olympique de Pantin 3, FC Lyon 0. The first Coupe de France final is not close on the scoreboard, but historically, it is enormous. And there's one detail that makes the war impossible to keep outside this story. FC Lyon's usual goalkeeper, Carlos Muti, was serving with the Foreign Legion. He was expected to take part, but chose instead to remain with his comrades at the front. A few months later, in August 1918, he is killed. That is the hinge of the whole episode. A cup final in Paris, a missing goalkeeper in the trenches, a trophy on display in a shop window, and a country still fighting for survival. You cannot separate the football from the war. The competition is born right inside it. So what did it mean? First and foremost, the Coupe survived. That is not automatic. Plenty of wartime competitions disappear because they belong too much to the emergency that created them. The Coupe Charles-Simon does the opposite. It carries through into the last months of war, through the armistice, and into a world immediately struck by the influenza pandemic. The second edition, 1918-19, expands to 59 clubs. The final moves to the Parc des Princes. Olympique, now the holders, return to the final, but lose 3-2 after extra time to Société Générale. That matters because by 1919, the competition is no longer an experiment, it has continuity. Olympique de Pantin become the first great almost club of the Coupe de France. They win the first final, yes, then finish runners-up in 19 and again in 21. They don't build a dynasty. In 1926, by then known as Olympique de Paris, they merged with Red Star, and that merger gives the story a lovely historical loop, because Red Star is Jules Rimet's club, founded on the idea that sport should cut across class barriers. So the institutional afterlife of the first Coupe de France winner flows into one of the most evocative clubs in Parisian football history. Red Star still exists today at Stade Bauer in Saint-Ouen. So if you want to follow the ghost Olympique de Pantin, you follow it there, not as a simple one-to-one continuation, but as a lineage absorbed into Red Star's long complicated Parisian identity. The Cup helps solve French football's government mess. In 1919, the Fédération Française de Football Association is created. Rimet becomes its first president. The CFI gives way to a national federation. The Coupe de France becomes one of the rituals through which that federation can make itself real. A national federation needs national competitions. A national competition needs stories. The Coupe already had them. War, memory, an open bracket, a real trophy, a first upset, and a suburban winner. And then there's the wider European hierarchy. The FA Cup is older, of course, much older. The Scottish Cup and several other national cups also predate the Coupe de France. But the French Cup quickly becomes one of Europe's great open national cup competitions. A tournament where small clubs can meet giants, where amateurs and professionals can share the same bracket, where later even clubs from overseas France enter the imagination of the tournament. That is why the FA Cup inspiration matters so much. Delaunay did not copy only a format, he copied a ritual. A national knockout cup tells a country that football belongs to more than one league table. It belongs to geography, to villages and suburbs, to cities and works teams, to amateurs and stars, to the possibility that a club from somewhere modest can get one afternoon against the powerful and force the nation to look. That is the lasting genius of the Coupe de France. It is not merely that Olympique de Pantin beat FC Lyon in 1918. It is that France created a competition in which that kind of story could keep happening. And the men around it did not stop here. Rimet helped turn international football into the World Cup. Delaunay helped give Europe its own national team championship. The Coupe de France sits at the beginning of that same administrative imagination. The belief that football becomes bigger when you give it a structure, ritual, and a trophy worth dreaming about. Before we go, 3 things to take away from May 5, 1918. First, the Coupe de France was born from fragmentation. Early French football was split among federations. The Cup gave the game a national ritual before the modern French Federation even existed. Second, It was a wartime competition in the deepest sense. It was named for Charles-Simon, killed at the front, launched while the Great War was still raging, and played by clubs whose squads and regions were shaped by military service. Third, the first final already contained the whole logic of cup football: a modest ground, a real trophy, surprise finalists, an outside winner, and the promise that hierarchy could be broken in 90 minutes. On this day in 1918, Olympique de Pantin beat FC Lyon 3-0 in Paris to win the first Coupe Charles-Simon, and in the middle of war, French football created the national cup that would become one of Europe's great open competitions. That is all for episode 186 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. Tomorrow, we go to May 6, 1970, when Feyenoord beat Celtic in Milan and kicked off the Dutch takeover of European football. See you tomorrow.